Good evening, everyone. My name is Thomas Varela. We appreciate you joining us this evening for a timely conversation on how to become a Philadelphia committee person. Um, we want to let you know that we will be recording this presentation. We are also live on our Facebook, on the Urban League Guild Facebook page. If you see in the chat, you'll see a link. We encourage you to share that link in the video feed to your network. So at this time, before we begin, we want to give a chance to allow all our co-hosts to provide brief remarks. We appreciate all of the organizations joining us this evening and helping to bring this important conversation to the community. So first, we would like to have Ms. Charlene Collins, who is the president of the Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As stated, I am Charlene Collins, president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Omega chapter, where we are celebrating 95 years of sisterhood and service to the Philadelphia community. I want to thank the Urban League for extending this invitation to collaborate on this important initiative. In addition, as we join fellow members of Divine Nine and local community partners, we hope that you or someone in this room will get engaged and decide to be a committee person. We look forward to future opportunities for us to collaborate on many other issues that concern our city. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. At this time, we'd like to invite Dr. Penny Nixon, who is the Philadelphia Alumni Chapter President of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Good evening and thank you. And again, I am Dr. Penny Sparks Nixon, and I am the proud president of the Philadelphia Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We too are celebrating 95 years of scholarship, service, and sisterhood to our communities. We would just like to thank all of the organizations this evening for partnering within this very important conversation. We understand that the position has meaningful influence in our communities and neighborhoods. So I too would hope that others would join in this endeavor to become a Philadelphia committee partner so that we can continue the work that we know needs to be done in the city of Philadelphia. Thank you.
Great. At this time, we want to introduce Bruce Hill, who is the Eastern Region President for the Pennsylvania Associations of Alpha Chapters, which is of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
Thanks, Tom. And again, good evening, everybody. I am Bruce Hill, District Director for the state of Pennsylvania. It's always a good opportunity to connect with the Urban League and to also impart the knowledge of a committee person, with my fellow members of the city of Philadelphia, as well as the various community organizations. So looking forward to this conversation. Again, thank you, Thomas.
Great, thank you. We'd like to have Ms. Latifah Fields, who serves as the president of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Pennsylvania chapter.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Thomas. Good evening to everyone on today. As Tom said, my name is Latifah K. Fields, and I'm the president for the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated, Pennsylvania chapter. We are proudly celebrating 40 years of advocacy here in Pennsylvania. We primarily do our work of advocating on behalf and unapologetically, as I like to say, on behalf of Black women and girls in the Philadelphia and surrounding county areas. You can find out more about us at www.nc10bw-pa.org.
Great. And we do ask all organizations joining us this evening, please feel free to leverage the chat to provide your contact information so organizations can stay in touch with you. At this time, we'd like to invite Ms. Gloria Temple Epperson, who is the president of the Urban League of Philadelphia Guild.
Thank you, Thomas. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to be here to co-host this event. I'm glad to see there are so many participants. I am the president of the Urban League Guild of Philadelphia. We have been in existence for 63 years. And our main objective is to raise funds for the Urban League of Philadelphia and help them with the great works that they do. And we have a great time doing it. And our organization is open to anyone who would like to join us and help us continue doing the good works for the Urban League. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. We want to also invite our other affinity group of the Urban League Next Philadelphia, who represents our young professional arm of volunteers. So Ms. LaToya Ritchie.
Thank you, Thomas. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. We're especially grateful for the Urban League of Philadelphia. As Thomas mentioned, my name is LaToya Ritchie, and I'm the president of Next Philadelphia, which is the Young Professionals Affinity Group. Next stands for the Network of Extraordinary Talent, and we work to support the Urban League of Philadelphia with all their endeavors in advocacy, education, economic empowerment. This week, we are especially celebrating Join Week, where we have the opportunity to invite more members in. So please keep a lookout on the chat if you know any young professional is looking for an opportunity to be involved. Thank you to Gilda Johnson, current committee person, Steve Paul, former committee person, and one of our very own members, Robert Bruce Hill, for this inspiring conversation. We're looking forward to it. So thank you again.
Great, great. Thank you. We also want to acknowledge our partners, co-hosts, Committee of 70, Open Wards Philly, the NAACPA State Conference, the Coalition of Labor Union Women, along with the 100 Black Men of Philadelphia. Is there a representative from 100 Black Men that's here? I know Joel Wilson may not have been able to join us, but I do want to give a chance for that organization to acknowledge, to provide brief remarks. Okay, no worries. Thank you once again to all of our co-hosts for joining us this evening. And as I mentioned, my name is Thomas Varela. I serve as the Director of Advocacy and Communications for the Urban League of Philadelphia. The Urban League of Philadelphia is a 105 years old civil rights organization. We've been around since 1917, uplifting African-American and other marginalized communities through economic empowerment, through housing, workforce, career readiness, small business development. Our goal here is to ensure that African Americans make it into the middle class and beyond. And we really appreciate everyone joining us this evening as we host this important conversation on how to become a Philadelphia committee person. Once again, this conversation is an opportunity for everyday citizens to understand the Philadelphia politics. I know many feel like politics can be messy overall, but what we really want to do is put a spotlight on why this role is open to anyone who feels that they want to be more engaged, someone who may be working an everyday job, but can still be involved in politics. And more importantly, a civic, an advocacy role and a civic engagement role where you are helping to bring information to your neighbors, to your community members, and others, so that they are more engaged and they are more aware as to the power of their vote. So at this time, we want to invite Gilda Johnson, Steve Paul, and Bruce Hill to begin this conversation. So I ask each of you to just briefly introduce yourself, who you are as a person, the work that you do, and the committee role that you may serve or that you did serve. So Gilda.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Thomas, for inviting me to talk about this, I think, important role. So a little bit about myself. I am a pediatric nurse practitioner, so totally not governmental at all. But just like anyone else on the call, I would like to live in a beautiful, vibrant, safe community, and with people, neighbors who are like-minded. And, you know, I realize that the way to direct dollars to the community and everything is then to really have, you know, tools for our community to thrive. It's really through governmental power. And so that made me interested in becoming a committee person. I think the first step in providing for our communities is by becoming knowledgeable about voting, becoming a knowledgeable voter. I've always voted, but really having the knowledge behind who you're voting for, who's going to represent your community to meet those needs in your community. So that's why I decided to become a committee person. So, and I'm a committee person for the 52nd Ward, 13th Division.
which is in the Winfield area of the city.
Great, thank you very much. Bruce?
Thanks, Tom. So I am Bruce Hill. I represent the 44th Ward, the 8th Division, which is West Philadelphia. I'm proud to tell anybody West Philadelphia is the best part of the city. West Philadelphia, born, raised, and educated. So I remember when I first cast my vote, 18 years old, and that was in the May election in 2006, so May 18th. And when I went to the polling place, I'd always started to look at who was there and, working the polls, who was passing out the literature, when you were going into the polling places. So as I gotten older, I became a member of Next Philadelphia. I became an alpha man. And one of those things was, as always, you have to be civically engaged. So I started to ask the questions of, who are the decision makers here in my community? And how do I become a part of that process? I didn't necessarily think that I wanted to, get heavily involved in politics, but you always hear that politics is local, and there are always community leaders and influencers who are in the area who I might be talking to, but I might not necessarily know who they are. So in about 2016, we don't have to rehash what happened in 2016. I said, you know what, there's so much going on in my community. I'm educated, I have a lot of skill sets, and I'm also connected to everyone in my community. So, how can I get more involved? And then I started hearing about a committee person. I'm like, well, what is a committee person? And everyone was like, well, hey, your committee person handles this, they handle that. So I did a little bit more research. And then I went into the polling place one day and I asked the question, well, who's the ward leader? Who are the committee people? And I started going down that rabbit hole and I started doing my research. And here comes 2018 when we had the election for committee people. And I reached out to the ward leader of the 44th Ward, and his first words were, where have you been? We need more young folks to take these roles because they're the ones who are out there, the boots on the ground. And I got involved. And I'll tell you, that is one of the best things that have happened, because I think I've gotten more involved than I could have ever even imagined, from neighbors calling me about things that, from the trash, or even, a local elected officials asking my opinion about how to get things done, or even asking the groups that I'm a part of to be a part of the initiatives that have been going on. So that was my journey to committee person. And it's been a great journey thus far.
Great, thank you very much. And Steve?
Hey everyone, my name is Steve Paul. Appreciate the invite, Thomas. So a little bit about myself. I was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, moved here to Philly when I was about 9 years old. Pretty much been in Philly ever since. Public school kid, graduated from Martin Luther King High School. Growing up as in a Haitian household, politics was like always the center of conversation, right? Whether it was politics in Haiti or politics here. So political conversation had a major influence on me ever since I was growing up as a kid. So, it's no surprise, like my career choice was to go into political work and organizing. So for the last 10 years, I spent my life basically working to build organizing power in order mostly to change, or I should say transform, local and state policy landscape. I've worked in City Hall for 4 years. I've worked on a few electoral campaigns as a campaign manager, as a field director. But really the role I've enjoyed the most in the last 10 years was working as a grassroots organizer. Through that work, I've seen just the power that comes from people coming together around an issue and trying to solve that issue, right? Like, we've seen the uprisings over the last summers, just seeing the significance of what a mass movement can create and how that could push towards policy change. And I really think like the ward system and the committee person structure for both political parties truly represents like an opportunity for everyday people who are not thinking about politics and necessarily every day to actually have a significant amount of power, and not just the electoral process, but also in changing policy and working to better their communities. So, that's why in 2014, I ran for committee person in the 17th Ward and won. And just like Bruce, I honestly didn't even know what a committee person was, even though I was doing a lot of political work. I had to ask one of my frat brothers, who was also a state rep at the time, Representative Kenzie, how I can get more politically involved. And he mentioned, just running for committee person. So I won in 2014. worked in my division to turn out the vote, got really connected with elected officials, which actually led to me working in city council. And in 2018, instead of running, I was part of a coalition of groups and organizations around the city who recruited hundreds of people to actually run for committee person position. So right now I live in the 12th ward. Instead of running, I actually recruited the 2 people who are actually the committee people in my division. So I'm super, super excited to see so many Black folks here looking to run for committee person. Excited for this conversation.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And let's dig a little bit deeper into like the nuts and bolts of what is a committee person? What is their role? What does your duties look like on day to day? All of you all mentioned that you work a 9 to 5 somewhere. So how do you balance what you do as a committee person? Bruce, I'll turn it over to you and I'll allow others to chime in.
Thanks, Tom. So, so the day-to-day work of a committee person, it's all in really what you make it and how actively involved you want to be, in your community. But the biggest part is, the committee people, they corral all the neighbors up to make sure that they get to the polls every May and every November. But then making sure that they are also educated about who's on the ballot, because the number one question everyone when they get to the polling place is, well, who's on the ballot? Who am I voting for? So that's the role of the committee people, is to make sure that they know who these individuals are and not making the decision for them, but helping them to make a decision so that they are well aware of and informed about the different issues that are going on. But taking it a step further as well, too, there are things that happen, on our very individualized blocks, and the committee people service about a 4 to 8 block radius in the divisions that they're responsible for. And so when things are happening in the area, the first thing that individuals do, they call up their committee people, because their committee people are pretty much, in tune to what's going on. Me specifically in West Philadelphia, I'm very involved, in my ward with there are a lot of development happening in the area. So when developers want to come in, put, let's say, like a new daycare center in the area, it's the committee people who they have to go and win the support of, because, as committee people, we are representing the best interests of our community, right? We know what's best, what will work, what won't work. But if we are going to say, hey, yes, you can come into this area, we want to make sure that it benefits those members of our communities as well, too. But then also it takes a, committee person to connect their constituents with different opportunities and resources. I know someone came to the polling place and said, hey, my kitchen is falling through the floor. Do you know any resources or anyone who I might be able to call on? Well, I didn't know, I didn't have an organization that I can send them to, but I had a couple of friends, who were interested in helping individuals because I made a call to ask. So it's really all in what you make it. And that's the impact that you can have as a committee person. But your biggest things are just making sure that your folks are getting to the poll every May and November.
Great. Jill, is there anything you may want to add on from your experience as to how you internalize the role?
Yes. Well, I was smiling when, Bruce, you mentioned about people asking about trash and things like that. So just on a neighbor level, I feel things like that a lot. So what I've decided to do is just make an email list and send information to the neighbors to let them know those kind of things, those issues about trash and where they can turn, providing resources to answer questions like when they were having a lot of the food bank giveaways during COVID, providing that information. And then, most importantly, as you mentioned, Bruce, about getting people to the polls. So I provide, information on, primaries, the questions on the ballot. I try to, circulate that information ahead of time so people know, about those important questions and, who's running. I used to, prior to COVID, Thomas, you might remember, run a group with a partner called Coffee and Politics to provide some information about, candidates, about the election, how it works, just even providing information, because a lot of people realize do not know just kind of civics, actually, whether it's not taught or you forget over time, and it could be something that seems it might seem simple, like, voting for local politicians versus federal politicians. And so just providing information regarding that. A lot of people don't know that there are 2 elections, pretty much every year. There's a primary and what that all means, and then the November elections. So just providing basic information like that, I think, is important.
Great, great. We're going to do a slight shift, Paul. I want to kind of get your expertise in terms of nuts and bolts of being a committee person. Could you elaborate a little bit more on, like, there's this closed wards versus open wards? What does that mean? And then also a little bit more in the technical aspect, like if a ward leader is a Democrat, does it mean that the committee people have to be Democrat? Does every division have Republican and Democratic? Could you elaborate a little bit more on structure along with like that question of like closed and open ward leader?
That question was to me?
Yes, Paul. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, so the difference between a closed ward and an open ward is, like, the simplest way to put it is, like, in a closed ward, in an open ward, there's a democratic process in how the ward itself runs, right? So just stepping back a little bit. So Philadelphia is broken up into sort of like 66 parts, right? Like, so there's like 66 wards. Each of those wards have a certain number of divisions in them. So for example, I live in a 12th ward, there's 24 divisions. Each of those divisions then have to elect 2 committee people every 4 years. So that's 48 committee people. And so once those committee people are elected by their neighbors in their division, they then have to come together and vote for a leader amongst themselves, which is typically what we call the ward leader. And so the ward leader really, in a closed ward, has a lot of power. So, for example, in a closed ward, the ward leader gets all of the say-so and who gets endorsed by the ward. So, the ward leader says, I'm endorsing this person for mayor, I'm endorsing this person for state rep. And then he or she distributes the ballots for election day that the committee people are going to be passing out, right? And then in an open ward, there might be a more democratic process. For example, the ward leader might say, we're going to have a forum and have all the candidates come and pitch to us why we should endorse them. There might be some bylaws or an agreed upon way of doing the endorsement process that's actually on paper. And then committee people in that open ward will get to vote for who they think the ward leader should endorse, as opposed to the ward leader making that decision. And if for some reason, I as a committee person endorse one person and the ward leader doesn't endorse them, I can have the option of having my own ballot. And then on election day, I can say, this is who the ward endorsed, but this is who I'm recommending. Or, I can choose not to take the resources of the ward and just do my own thing. And that's pretty encouraged in the open ward. The other thing is, like, open wards tend to have sort of shared kind of like power, right? Like, so I know some open wards, they have a steering committee that runs the ward. So you have the ward leader, the first and second vice chair, the treasurer, all collectively making decisions together about the ward. Whereas in an open ward, in a closed ward, really is the ward leader that is making all of the decisions. That's pretty much the major difference. I will say, like, open wards are not as simple as they sound. Like, there's a huge variety of, like, what an open ward could look like. It gets, like I said, it could simply just be endorsement process. Committee people have a say-so to, there's an open process by endorsement, there's a website, there's like shared power for all the committee people. So it could look a different way, but basically open wards give committee people a say-so. Closed wards, the ward leader really runs the ward.
Great, thank you for that. It's pretty interesting to hear how it's not uniform across the whole city. So it does, for someone that is interested in being a committee person, there's a little bit of homework that you have to do to kind of understand if the ward is an open ward or closed ward, and then kind of negotiate what does that mean in terms of being involved with that. So I guess trying to open it to the rest of the panelists, what do you see as like strengths and weaknesses of your job? Like what's a good day? What's a bad day? What's a day, like what's a situation where you're throwing your hands up and you're like, this is no longer of need for me. I just want to go back into hiding. And then what are days where it feels like this is why I signed up for this? Gilda? Well,
I think as far as strengths, I'm pretty passionate about informing people. And, I believe that people kind of need to make their own decisions. I'm a Democrat and I'm under the ward leaders, Democrat. And so for the most part, I'm promoting the Democratic candidates. However, I do provide information on all the candidates just so that people are informed. My biggest challenge is, that doesn't always fit within the ward system because they, at least that's been my experience. That doesn't mean I'm not promoting the people even that that the board may be promoting. At the same time, I feel that people need to be informed voters. And I think that people need to have all the information that they need to have to make that decision. So probably I'm passionate about providing that information and getting good representation for a community. But my biggest challenge is probably it doesn't always fit into the, ward structure.
Great. Steve and Bruce, Steve, I know based on your experience, Bruce, in terms of your current experience, how do you internalize the work when it feels good, when it feels like it's a little bit of a struggle?
Yeah, Tom, I think, a good day is when I look at the number of registered voters within my division and we get at least, I'll say 50%. But, once they start tallying up the numbers at the end of the night, and when you see you have about 500 registered voters in your area, but not even 20% came out to cast their ballot, that's a bad day for me. Because number one, I begin to ask the question, why isn't everyone engaged? And, am I doing my job as the committee person, making sure that those individuals are getting to the poll? But I had to take me out of it, right? Because I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But then, individuals have to just want to get to the polls. And so that's a good day for me when I see my voters, they're coming out in record numbers that I haven't seen before. But it's a bad day when, we've been at the polling place for about 12, 13 hours, during that day. And, my specific division in West Philadelphia, where we're lucky if we even cracked 50 voters, come out and cast their votes. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know, this isn't working, but we've got to figure out, what works. But then also a part of that is when we have community meetings, I'll use development as an example again, because there's a lot of development that's happening right within West Philadelphia, right within the ward that I'm a part of, where we circulate information and say, hey, we're having this community meeting, but it's the same individuals who show up meeting after meeting after meeting again. And then when things happen in the ward, everyone's asking the question, well, what happened? It's like, well, hey, you know what? We've got to do our parts as constituents of this division of this ward to come out when we put the call out. So that's when I want to say, you know what? I want to back off. But then that's why I'm there to advocate for the best interest of those who I represent in West Philadelphia.
Great. And Steve, a slight different question, but along the same lines. You've helped people become a committee person. So what do you give them as words of wisdom to prepare them for this role? How do you just make sure that they understand what they're getting themselves into?
Yeah, I think also, so it just, the thing I always tell people is whether you're in an open ward or a closed ward, right? Where the ward leader really likes to be hands-on and make all the decisions. You really are the people who elected you are the people in your division, right? Like Bruce was saying, it was it could be in your division anywhere from 500 to 1,500 voters that are registered voters in your division. Those are the people that get to vote for you. So, right, those 300, 200 people showed up, voted for a committee person are your responsibility. Those are the people you are accountable to. So I always tell people, just focus on that. Sometimes, I think Ms. Johnson was kind of alluded to this in time, right? You may make a decision on a candidate that the ward leader might not like, right? And they might, have something to say to you about it. The perfect example of this, when I ran in 2014, I became a committee person. I actually organized a town hall. This, folks remember, there was 30 candidates running for city council. It was an open mayoral primary, so it was a lot of people. And I got together with the 35th District Town Watch. I got together with my church, and we organized a candidates forum. It was 200 people that showed up. Well, the ward leader didn't like that at the time, right? They want to have the forum. So who are you, committee person, having a forum? But it was my responsibility as a committee person to educate my constituents about the candidates that are going to be on the ballot. And that actually, you know, a candidate that wasn't going to be endorsed by our ward was then endorsed by our ward because of that forum that we did. And all of the candidates that are endorsed in that election actually won my division, because I started to build trust with my constituents. I started to get out the vote 3 weeks before election, talking to people about the candidates. So I do think it's just like just telling people like they really have a lot of power. And I think sometimes when you get in the ward system, you know, if you're not a political person, you like tend to be like, oh my God, this ward leader is like this big, super powerful person. But like really, you as an elected person have a lot of power in that situation. So that's what I try to tell people as a word of encouragement. There are some, you know, there are some people in wards that are not necessarily open, that they come together as committee people, maybe 10 divisions, they form an open caucus, so to speak, right? Like they themselves decide, like as a collective, they're gonna have an endorsement process, they're gonna knock on doors, they're gonna educate their constituents, regardless of what the entire ward is doing. And, you know, obviously that creates a lot of tension, but really your job is to educate your constituents about what's going on. And that's the most important thing.
Great, great. So we're going to take a slight shift in gear. Gilda and Bruce, how much time do you think you spend being a committee person? Is it a 24/7 type of job? How do you how much time do you feel like you commit a week or a month? Just to give a sense as to like that time commitment. Bruce, I'll start with you.
It's so, you know, I guess that's kind of a relative question, right? You know, going back to this, what you make it. You know, my constituents know that they can call me anytime, or they can reach me by Facebook, by text message, because, you know, there might be something that's going on, you know, that I might not, you know, be aware of. But I think, but on a monthly basis, about like 4 hours, and that's where, you know, it's ward work where I have to be present, where we've got an RCO meeting where I have to go and have a conversation with my ward leader, you know, about something, or even kind of like now, right? We're getting into election season, you know, individuals want to start coming, you know, to meet who the committee people are, as well as, you know, the ward leader. So this is where you kind of get into your busy time, but I'll say about 4 to 5 hours, you know, a month, with just things that I have to be a part of. But then I'm talking to my neighbors all the time. And, you know, I consider that, you know, an everyday thing, because I'm finding out something new just by talking about my neighbors, where, you know, hey, we put in a noise complaint, you know, someone next door, you know, can you follow up on that? Hey, well, you know, I'll call the police district. I know the community relations officer. So it can be more, but I'll say about 4 to 5 hours officially per month for me.
Great, Gilda.
So some of the same things that you're doing, Bruce, like, so community, just general community stuff, you know, that, so I'm on different committees within the division, within the ward. So that might take a couple of hours per week. But then I do other things like, check on neighbors. We have a cleaning committee, so that takes a little bit of time, and we do that, once or twice a week. And then distributing. So now I'm getting ready to distribute information on the primary. So I'm getting like information together. So that's when it becomes a little bit intense, because I'm kind of gathering information on, who's running, and just putting that together as a packet. And then I'm going to be distributing that to the voters in my division. So that takes a lot of time. So as it gets closer to election time, it might be probably on a weekly basis, maybe about 7 hours, about this time of year.
And Tom, and I'll also just add to that. So I think, with this past election cycle, I think, in terms of, last year, the presidential election, I was working just about every day in some sort of capacity, whether it was phone banking, helping the ward with something, that they needed. But then also in 2019, when the city of Philadelphia introduced the new voting machines, we were hosting, voting machine trainings, almost, weekly, or even in some instances daily, and working with different organizations, because, the voting machines that have been around for such a long time, a lot of our consistent voters are seasoned voters, right? They're seasoned in age, and you introduce a new technology to them. And, the automatic thing is technology fright, right? So we were worried that they weren't going to show up in record numbers. But I was surprised at the number of them who were showing up to these different voter trainings. And that was my big part of one of my busiest times. And I was happy to see that, because not only were they willing to learn the technology, but then they also wanted to understand it. And that's very, very there. That's impactful that you have as a committee people, because not only individuals within your division, they get to know who you are, but it's other individuals from your particular ward as well as other wards who they get to know you as well.
Great, great. Want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. We are still, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We want to thank the Urban League of Philadelphia, along with the Omega Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, the Philadelphia Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Philadelphia Alumni chapter Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, the Pennsylvania Association of Alpha Chapters, Committee of 70, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Incorporated, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania chapter, the 100 Black Men of Philadelphia, Open Wards Philadelphia, the Urban League Guild of Philadelphia, Next Philadelphia, the Urban League of Philadelphia Young Professionals, the NAACP PA State Conference, and the Coalition of Labor Union Women. So as you can see, a lot of great partners came together to bring this conversation to the community. So I want to thank you all for joining us. So Steve, want to go into a little bit more nuts and bolts. So someone on this call is ready to rock and roll. They said they're ready to jump into this work and they want to begin the process. What would you say is the next step? They came to you, they said, hey, Steve, I want you to help me win as well. What do I do? What's the first step? I know you mentioned that there was a little bit of a delay in terms of the schedule. So like, give us a little bit more of that nuts and bolts as to like, next step, what should that person do?
Yeah, well, first, there are a lot of organizations that are dedicated to helping train, work with folks who are willing to, step up and run for committee person. So I'm happy to post those on the website. I'm specifically, in terms of like, if you want to learn about like the nuts and bolts and more details, I would encourage everyone to visit like Open Wards Philly. It's a group of like sort of veteran committee people, some veteran ward leaders and new committee people who are basically interested in helping folks learn and about the committee person process, educate them and support them if they're interested in just learning about the nuts and bolts. That would be the first thing I would say. There are also a lot of grassroots organizations that are working to help elect committee people this cycle. The other thing I would say is like, you should visit Philly. The Committee of 70 has a good sort of like a brochure, a book on everything committee person, how to run, what the petition is like, what the experience is like. So I'd encourage folks, that was the first thing I did in 2014. They've since updated that book. I read that thing like 100 times. And then you could go to phillyvotes.com, which is where you could get your petitions, your affidavits, and everything you need to actually run for committee person. And so there are two sort of ways you can become a committee person. The first is you can be a write-in candidate. I actually recruited someone to run as a write-in candidate in 2018, like 3 days before election. And so basically that process is, hey, I want to be committee person last minute. You just show up to the polls on election day. Well, back in the day was like, you would have to have a box of pens with you, a one-pager of like how you actually get somebody write your name in. It was a whole process. Hope they don't spell your name wrong. But with the new machines, literally you show up on election day, you tell people, hey, I'm Steve Paul, I'm running for committee person. I need you to write my name in because my name is not gonna show up on the ballot. But the one way I would encourage everyone to run is like as an official candidate, right? That means you have to go online, in PhiladelphiaVotes.com, create your petitions, and then you have to circulate these petitions in your division. So if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you have to get 10 Democrats or 10 Republicans to actually sign your petition in order for your name to show up on the ballot. And there are, again, like Open Wards Philly, other folks will have trainings on like the best way to actually do your petitions, because there's a whole lot of ways you can mess up your petitions. I know we don't have time to get into that right now, but like we would, if I was training someone, I would encourage them, obviously, don't get just 10 petitions because people in Philly challenge petitions all the time. So you want to get like 30. It's also a good opportunity. It's an easy ask from your neighbor. You're not asking them to vote for you, right? You're just saying, I'm trying to get on the ballot. can you sign my petition? This is who I am. So if you get 30, 40, that's even better, because those are also people potentially are going to vote for you on election day. So those are just basically the two ways. You can have other people also circulate your petition for you. There's a whole process for that. They also have to have also have to sign some papers, and then you have to get things notarized. But you can have I had 2 people signing circulating my petitions in 2014 in addition to me. So yeah, it's basically those are the 2 ways you can run it, either as a write-in or as an official candidate, and you have to like get people to sign your petition, which is super fun. You could get I got 30 petitions in 2014 while I was working. I did like an hour a day. I signed my own petition, then my household had 6. I was already near 10. It's very simple to get 10 petitions. So getting 30 won't be a problem, honestly.
Great, thank you very much. And as it was mentioned, Committee of 70, which is one of our partners, there's great information there that can be found on, just the technical aspects of running for office. Steve, you have another point you want to make?
I was just gonna say, because the petition period is also very long. It was supposed to be from February 15th to March 8th. That's been postponed now because of the Supreme Court decision. So we don't know when petitions are going to be circulated. So I would encourage anyone who's interested in running for committee person to still start to talk to your neighbors now. But the petition period is on hold temporarily because of all the redistricting stuff happening at the Supreme Court. So
great. Thank you for that. And we also, going back to the previous comments, just want to thank you and acknowledge Al Schmidt for joining us this evening. He is the new CEO of Committee of 70, so former city commissioner. If you paid attention to the 2020 election, he represented Philadelphia well as a former city commissioner, and now is the CEO of Committee of 70. So Al Schmidt, thank you for joining us. I'm not sure if you are available, if you want to share a brief comment, just introduce yourself.
No, I'm really here just to listen and to learn. I moved to Philadelphia in 2005 and went to an event like this just a couple months later and ended up quitting my job working for the federal government to run for committee person, which was the most ridiculous thing I've certainly ever done. But it worked out, and it was because of events like this that I got involved in the first place. So I'm grateful for you doing it, and let us know how we can be supportive.
Great, thank you. So going back into the questions, I guess for you all, Gilda, Bruce, Steve, what are the skills that you feel are effective in this role? Like, what skills do you feel like you use to be effective as a committee person? Gilda, what would you say? I know, in healthcare, I know there's a lot of triage that you do, and first responder roles. I imagine there's a lot of overlap in terms of that, in terms of your neighbors coming to you and communicating an emergency that you may want to quickly tell them to go to urgent care or the emergency room, but you have to kind of tackle that in this role. Tell us a little bit about some of the skills that you feel like you use to be effective.
So I think probably number one, you have to be willing to kind of get out there and, want to be a good neighbor. You want to, I think you have to have the skills of, wanting to communicate with people, enjoying, getting to be involved in your community. So I think that's probably the number one skill. It's just being a good, friendly neighbor. I think nowadays, people, sometimes you don't even know your neighbors. So I think you have to be willing, as I said, to get out there to kind of know your neighbors. And so I think that's probably the number one skill. Yeah, if I have to say, that's probably. And then also, I think have an interest in using politics as a tool for your neighborhood to make it better. So kind of communicating how politics relates to your everyday life, because I think that's the big disconnect for people. And so I think communicating that as a skill is an important skill, because I think our numbers, the number of voters in the city sometimes being so low is because of that. Like, people can't relate it to their lives. And so I think if you can connect that with why it's important, and then you're going to probably get more engaged voters.
Great, great. Bruce, what would you add?
It's so it's interesting, and I think this is just part of my profession as a funeral director and as an accountant. You got to be able to speak in terms that the community members understand. So you don't want to be talking about like something, well, they know the Democrats or the Republicans, but they might not necessarily know the things that might be happening in city council. So you got to know how to break it down so that way that they understand it and where it impacts their daily life. But then secondly, you have to know how to network with your neighbors. And when I mean like network, literally going outside, waving to Miss Charlene, say, hey, Miss Charlene, how are you doing? Do you need anything carried to your car? Because that little gesture, you're guaranteed to learn about 20 years worth of history, who's there, or, what are some of the issues that might be going on, or, Miss Susie, who doesn't come out of the house, but she knows everything what's going on, and someone is able to get that one, Miss Charlene is able to communicate on Miss Susie's behalf. So you have to know how to network because eventually, these your constituents are going to go and vote for you, when your name appears on the ballot. And, one of the things I've learned about Philly voters, they remember a name, and if they don't see your name there, to either two things that are going to happen. Either they're not going to vote, or they're going to, raise some ruckus, say, hey, where's this person's name? Because that's somebody that they built a relationship, with too. But then you also have to know how to put the voters at ease, right? Because they want to make sure that they're comfortable with sharing, information with you. And it's just, it's a small gesture. My neighbors knew me as, that's the guy with the clean car. I was always cleaning out my car. And they're like, they will always walk up and say, hey, I want to tell you, I want to talk to you a little bit about your car. But then also, let me tell you this. So and when I won for committee person, I started learning more. And, one of my neighbors said, you seem to be a good organizer. We need to have our own community organization right here. So you also have to be, very, very relatable. So I'll say, number one, knowing how to communicate on their level, being able to know how to network, but then also be able to listen to, what their issues are.
Great, great. Steve, a slight different question. How does one kind of get past some of the minutia of Philly politics? Being concerned with just Philly politics and the messiness of it. How do you encourage people to not get so wrapped up in that, but just to stay focused on what their goal is? How do they, there's so much that can, there's so much that can exist, right? We could spend a whole nother day talking about all that's Philly politics. So how do you just encourage someone that may feel like politics is too messy for them, but they really just want to do this role? What would you give them as words of advice?
That's a hard question. Politics is definitely, it's hard to avoid the messiness of Philly politics if you're going to get into this role. I guess what I will say is this, I think I said this earlier, right? And I think Bruce and Ms. Johnson started to talk about this. If you care about your neighbors, if you care about the issues, right? Like me as an organizer, right? The gun violence in the city is something that that really, really stick with me as someone who's who's been impacted by the criminal legal system, right? Encounters with police. Those are all issues, as an immigrant, there are issues that I care about that are related to politics. Honestly, it's hard to disconnect the issues and the politics to wanting to do this. So I think, the one thing I will say is that at the end of the day, you should think about focusing on that. The goal of a committee person here, we've been saying all night, is to educate your constituents about the issues, educate their constituents about the candidates that are on the ballots or whatever, right? If you stick to that, when all of the internal bickering and all of that happens, you will just remember these people voted me in to do a job, and my job is to get 100% turnout. My job is to get the best candidates elected. And I was able to do that in a ward that was messy, you know what I mean? My first introduction to Philly politics was not a nice one. And, as someone who seeing what can happen when a government goes crazy, that kind of took me back. I was like, whoa, this is a lot. But I was still encouraged by the fact that my neighbors were dependent on me to do a job. So, right, your job is to register people to vote when they move to the neighborhood. If there's an issue, I need to call the district council person and handle that for you. This pothole's been sitting here for days, right? Like, how do I connect all of the things that are happening to the neighborhood to actually election in this electoral process? Because we know people vote year after year, election after election, but they still seeing the rise in gun violence. Their paychecks still don't say nothing more than $8 an hour. So like, you have a lot of work to do. And as long as you focus on like that connection with you and your constituents and your neighbor, right? And also building like, and I think Bruce started to talk about this, like building relationships with other people within your ward to do the work, like it will be rewarding, I promise. And so like, you just need to like cut out all of the other noise and just like stay focused on what you are here to do.
Great. One final question. This is for everyone, if possible. This may be a difficult question to answer, so I do put that out there. Is there a percentage of new candidates that are like guaranteed to win? Like, is it difficult for a new candidate to win? Is it typically hard? I mean, is it easy? Is it hard? And hopefully I captured that question correctly from the audience, but like, what is the percentage of new candidates that enter election? Is there a guarantee that they win, or is that difficult to say? Steve, do you have any insight on that?
I mean, I will say, so I've had two situations, right? One situation where I've won, one situation where I've lost. The situation where in both situations, I was running against someone who had been in a neighborhood for 40 plus years, right? And, and their father was the committee person before them. They became the committee person, their partner retired, their brother was gonna become the committee person. And then I came out of nowhere, this young 20-something-year-old, like, who are you, right? And I still beat them. The second situation, they had been there for 50 and 56 years together. And they had, like 20 cousins and family members in the neighborhood. So I just want to say, like, no matter the situation, you gotta be up against folks who've been in the neighborhood, been in the community. So it's not necessarily gonna just be a shoo-in. It's hard to say like how many people win, but if you do the work of knocking on doors, getting to know your neighbors, if this committee person is not doing their job, it doesn't matter how long they've been a committee person, right? If they're doing their job, it's your job to convince people why you're the right candidate. So, I mean, that's just what I would tell people. Just get out there, get to know your neighbors. The other thing I would say is like, you'll be surprised how many of these wards, the committee seat has been just left open, or there's an elder in the community who I necessarily like, I had people tell me, listen, I've been doing this for 50 years. I wish there was another young kid like you who stepped up and said they wanted to do it. I would gladly step down. It's, I can't knock on doors. I can't phone bake anymore. So I'm glad you're doing it. So, it just depends on the ward that you're living in.
And Thomas, and to also add to to Steve's point, when I ran for committee person, in the 44th ward, the ward leader said to me, "Man, where have you been all this time?" And I say, "Okay, look, I got to shoe in right there," because there had been somebody, as a committee person, have been there just, for years and years, but their true passion was, being in the polling place on election day. But so I was, gladly, I put my name out there, talked to my neighbors, and I won. But what I also have learned two things. It also depends upon what ward you're in and what division it is, because the competition, or I'll say I won't say rights to the seat, but those who want those seats, it could be very, very competitive. But then also that's why it's important to have a conversation with the ward leader, because there are so many committee seats that go unfilled year after year after year. And it's just as simple as, the ward leader saying, "Hey, I've got this vacancy in, in Division 18. You can go and serve in, Division 18. While that might not be your particular block, but then you also now have experience that you wouldn't have otherwise, gotten, had you not won, and said election. But I think also, part of that is, you just got to, want to do it and, and put it out there. And going back to your other question, Tom, I don't want to kind of like piggyback. I had an interesting experience, once I got elected. There was another committee person who was actually running against the ward leader. And somehow, word got out that I was supposedly going to be supporting, another candidate. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I had no idea what was going on. So it was messy walking in, for me. But I had to remind myself, why I was there. I said, I'm here for the people, all that I can manage that on my own. but the individuals on 44-8 are worried, are worried about Bruce and whether or not he's going to do his job. So I had to keep that, at the forefront of my mind, and it's been golden, since then. So if there's anybody who wants to go run for committee person, just do it, just do it. Nothing beats a failure but a try.
Great.
And just to mention, to kind of share a little bit of my experience with that is I had a situation similar to Steve's, and that when I ran, I actually didn't, unlike you, Bruce, do the research to who could possibly run against me or who had any any kind of problems with me running even. So I kind of found out that the one seat was sort of open because the committee person was disabled. So I thought, okay, so, I'll go ahead and run, not knowing that I wasn't the person that was supposed to win, but I did the work as far as knocking on doors and just getting to know my neighbors. And so that's what I did, and made people aware that I was running and what I was planning on doing. I was already doing some of the work. I was doing a lot of the work beforehand. It was actually one of my neighbors who said, you should run, because I was doing those town halls, like you said, Steve, to inform people about the upcoming elections, and just about politics and civics in general. And so I guess that's kind of how I became sort of a target to not necessarily be the person they wanted to win. But so people knew me from that, and they said I should do it. And so I just knocked on the doors and just told the neighbors who I was, and I ended up winning. And so, it's, and like you said, Steve, I just try to tell myself I'm there providing the information to my neighbors and doing the work in my neighborhood. And that's the most important thing, to whether or not, people agree with me or disagree. I feel like I'm doing what it needs to be done. And people have told me that. So as long as I'm doing that, I feel like I'm okay with that.
Great, great. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We do have one final question. We want to be sensitive to time, so want to end with this last question, but want to also once again thank our partners for bringing this conversation to the community. We have recorded this presentation, so if you register for this event, you will receive a copy of the presentation. I also want to remind everyone that we will have another similar presentation focused on some of the education updates that exist in Philadelphia. The date hasn't been set, but look out for that. That includes, if you don't know, Governor Wolf just announced his budget proposal for 2022. Also, there's a lawsuit that's happening right now where a bunch of organizations have sued the General Assembly around inequitable school funding. And then also in Philadelphia, they are searching for a new superintendent. So our hope is to bring some updates on all three of those initiatives to the community. So once again, we will make sure to, once that event is announced, make sure to send that to you all. So Steve, I want to end with a final question to you. I want to first thank Gilda Johnson, Bruce Hill, and Steve Paul for joining us this evening for this conversation. Steve, I know one of the things that you champion is the sense of power, and how this role is a powerful role, and the way that you may leverage that power to really be impactful, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you are now part of the ecosystem of that party. So I guess, could you close out with like why this is important for people to be in this role and the power that they have to really influence change?
Yeah, sure. Before I answer that, I just think Ms. Johnson's story is amazing. I had somebody actually win with like 8 votes just to be like as a writing candidate. So like, as long as you do the work, like you are likely to get elected, just to be clear. So, I mean, so I'll just say this. I think, like we're talking about a massive structure here, right? Like 1,700 divisions across the city, each of them with 2 committee people for both parties. So you're talking about at full capacity, like 3,400 people on the ground, knocking on doors, registering people to vote, getting out the vote. This is potentially a huge infrastructure to like get out the vote. And if if we were to leverage that power to its full extent, like you could see an increased number of voter turnout, more people involved in the political process. And, you know, I think we talked a lot tonight about just like some of the roles of a committee person, including like, you know, like registering people who are knocking on doors. But truly the most powerful thing, in my opinion, that comes from being a committee person is your ability to elect your ward leader. Like once you elect your ward leader, every committee person that gets elected ward leader in all 66 wards are sending these ward leaders to then sit in some room in Center City to elect the party chair of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, right? So as a Democrat in the 12th ward, I elect my ward leader. My ward leader goes with the other 65 ward leaders. They sit in a room, they elect their leader, which currently is Bob Brady. And the boss of the Democratic Party has a lot of like power in terms of like who gets endorsed by the Democratic Party for city council at large, for district seats, for United States Senate. When a president comes to Philly, they are meeting with the party boss. So if you think about it, all of this power starts with you running in your division, selecting the committee, selecting who the ward leader is, and then that kind of works its way up the party chain, so to speak. So it is a lot of power. And I just like, you know, you elected in May, that first meeting in June is super important. Who gets to be ward leader? So I just want people to know, like, this position, even if you do nothing but that, the ability to elect your ward leader holds a lot of influence in terms of like the future of the party and the type of candidates that get elected to national, statewide office. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Gilda, Bruce, Steve. Thank you for a very honest and open conversation. Once again, we want to thank all our partners. We listed them in the chat. Want to give you a chance to get back to dinner or get back to your evening. So want to say thank you once again for everyone for joining us this evening for this important conversation. And please make sure to go check into Committee of 70 so that you can follow the rules and make sure that you're clear with deadlines and the process so that you really make sure you don't make no mistakes and that you are successful if you decide to run for committee person. So thank you once again, everyone, and enjoy your evening.